Hi folks, happy Friday to you. I trust that you've had a good reading week. Well, what have I been reading this week? I finished Solaris by Stanislaw Lem, about which I have mixed feelings. We are in orbit above the planet Solaris. And I say orbit, the station, which is pretty large, seems to be able to ascend and descend at will, getting to within a few meters of the surface when it needs to. We've been studying Solaris for decades. There's a huge body of academic work hypothesizing about the nature of life on Solaris, and I know this because we have to read a significant chunk of it as part of the book. But back to that in a minute. Our protagonist is Kelvin, who's recently arrived back on station, and he immediately gets the impression that things are not as they should be. But what exactly is going on? He gets a taste of it when he's visited in his room by an African tribal woman in a grass skirt and a straw hat and not a lot else. Who is she, and how the hell does she get to Solaris, and why on earth is she in his room? He soon gets another visitor, and this is when things get really weird for him. His visitor is his long-dead wife. She doesn't know anything, how she came to be there or why she's there, but she does know him and cannot bear to be separated from him. Meanwhile, equally strange stuff is happening to his two colleagues on the station. Lem does a good job of building a sense of claustrophobic weirdness, and this is the aspect of the book that I really enjoyed. The scientists try to theorise about what the hell's going on, trying their best to ignore their visitors, capital V. Are they a manifestation of the strange ocean? Is it an attack? Is it merely an attempt at communication? It's never really explained who the African woman is or was, but she's visiting with one of Kelvin's colleagues. The atmosphere gets more and more claustrophobic and intense as the book progresses. Sadly for me, it's punctuated by lengthy sections of info dump, and actually is worse than info dump. Kelvin is a frequent visitor to the academic library on the station, full of books, how marvellously anachronistic for a space station orbiting a planet around another star. And then he spends page after page of the book reading from academic papers. I powered through the first one of these info dumps, but for several others I just skimmed or even skipped them entirely. They were just uninteresting. I'm led to understand that the translation makes a huge difference. My edition was apparently translated from Polish to French and then to English. Maybe it suffered a little bit in the translation as a result. But honestly, I can't imagine a much better translation zhuzhing up the academic yawn fest that much. I fear that the source material is just dull in this respect. Solaris for me had a split personality then. Sweaty, intense, claustrophobic, weird, inscrutably alien, highlighting the impossibility of communicating with an alien entity that just operates on an entirely different basis to us monkeys. That part I really liked. I would have happily read more of that. The really tedious academic info dumps, they, I'm afraid, can get in the bin. I finished Revelation Space by Alastair Reynolds on audiobook this time, and it's a reread for me, with a gap measured in decades now since I first read it. I was very happy to be back in this world, which of course Reynolds goes on to explore more thoroughly in the following books and short stories set in the same universe. There are three plot threads which start quite separately, separated by a number of years in fact, but converge as the book progresses towards its revelatory climax. We begin with an archaeological dig on Resurgam, a relatively recent colony world previously home to an alien civilization, the Amarantin, who seem to have been scoured from the planet in some catastrophic solar event a million years previously. Dan Sylvestre, the archaeologist, is obsessed with understanding what happened to them, concerned with what it might mean for humanity's tenuous expansion into the Big Bang galaxy. We're also introduced to the Ultras, denizens of the interstellar deep, toing and froing on kilometres-long light-hugger starships. The Ultras are a cheery bunch, their sense of humour greatly improved by spending decades alone in space. Okay, they're not that cheery, to be honest. They seek the archaeologists' help with their captain, infected with the gothically horrific melding plague. He alone may be able to cure the captain, or at least arrest the development of the disease. The third thread begins on Yellowstone with Anna Curie, an ex-soldier turned paid assassin who's commissioned by the mysterious Mademoiselle to kill the archaeologist, for reasons unknown, at least to begin with. There's a lot going on, even from the beginning in this book. Alastair Reynolds likes to keep things plausible from a technology point of view, so there's no convenient faster-than-light travel, which of course means realistic journey times betwixt the stars. That's all good, but there are implications which were a little bit difficult to keep track of when listening to the audiobook. At least to begin with, the plot jumps around years at a time, backwards and forwards and backwards again, depending on which point of view character we're following at the time. This is all very correct and necessary so that the plot threads, separated by light years as they are to start with, can converge in one place and at one time later on. This all makes perfect sense, but I found it a little bit jarring when the chapter headings announced the year 2561, for instance. And I found myself thinking, wait, weren't we in 2543 or something before? If I was reading the physical book, I'd just be able to flick back to the previous chapter and check where I am, orient myself, but I couldn't do that on the audiobook, and it was a little bit unsettling. It was a minor problem in the great scheme of things. I enjoyed being back in this universe. I think that Reynolds does a really great job introducing us to this possible future with hints of other planets, of other relics, other human factions that we don't actually meet in Revelation space. I liked being reintroduced to the Baroque Ultras and their strange existence. Captain Brannigan's melding plague affliction is wonderfully gruesome. The light hugger, the nostalgia for infinity is just cool, and I think that Reynolds does a great job of conveying its size. And having read this, I now feel that I need to read the other books set in the same universe. Oh no, how terrible for me. I also read Plutoshine by Lucy Kissick. It's a relatively recent book. I really had no idea what to expect from it. I've heard mixed reports, so I was interested to read it. Books that generate strong opinions either way are a bit of a gamble, but I think always worth a read. In Plutoshine, we're in a future solar system where we've colonised several planets with varying degrees of success. Terraforming is a profession now, and Lucius is one such, a sunbringer. He is tasked with building an enormous parabolic mirror to capture the faint rays from the distant sun and deflect them onto Pluto, the icy ex-planet of the Peace. There's already a scientific station there established for some time with 100 or so scientists and their families. Nu, a 10 or 11-year-old girl, is the daughter of the founder of the colony, and she no longer speaks. She's a selective mute. It's strongly implied that there's some trauma in her recent past which has caused this. Something, we gather, involving her and her family. Lucius and Nu hit it off, and there develops a very touching, heartwarming friendship, something akin to a parent-child bond. Big old softie that I am, this element of the plot really worked for me. And I think if you enjoy at all the Becky Chambers books, then Plutoshine is worth a read just for this aspect alone. But despite all this cosy niceness, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Not everyone agrees, it seems, that Pluto should be terraformed, and they hack the Plutoshine project with plenty of ensuing peril. To all of this is added the potential for life on Pluto despite the extreme conditions. All of these threads gradually converge to a heady climax. I enjoyed my time in this book, and it kept me up late last night because I wanted to finish it. If I was to be picky, there were some aspects that seemed scientifically unrealistic to me. Can spacesuits be made so that they're protective enough to cope with extreme cold, barely above absolute zero, but also flexible enough to allow the residents to go for a run of a morning? Can you actually run in gravity 1/10 of Earth's, considerably less even than the Moon's? Some concession is made to the low G environment. Kissick does describe what running might be like. The base was a very homely environment. There's a lot of baking and tea drinking, and even a low-G rotating swimming pool. Call me sceptical, but how the heck was all of that transported 9 billion miles to Pluto? We are an unspecified length of time in the future, mind, so who knows what manufacturing tricks are available. Like I say, these are minor, picky points, and after all, the hell do I know? Overall, though, I thought it was a good read and somewhat unputdownable, as I said. Plutoshine is Lucy Kissick's first and so far only novel, but I am led to believe that she is writing another one. Subscribers are at 2,383, which is up 24 on last week. And if you're one of those 24, or if you're here for the first time today, a huge welcome to you. My name's John, and I focus on collecting, reading and chatting about science fiction books, old and new. Comment of the week was from Seth, who very much likes a good list. He also has the Broderick and DeFilippo 101 best science fiction books that I was banging on about last week, as well as the David Pringle list of the 100 best novels from 1949 to 1984, which precedes it. He's been busy working his way through the lists and gives his thoughts on what's worked and what hasn't for him. It's a very thorough comment. Thank you, Seth. I enjoyed reading it and chatting about it in the replies. Much appreciated. And the same, of course, goes for any of you that take the time to leave a comment. I always enjoy reading and replying to them. Let's take a look at what was on the channel this week. There were 2 videos. On Sunday, there was September's book haul. I added a bunch of very interesting books to my collection, I think. One in particular, a reference book, the same one that Seth referred to in his comment, you'll be hearing much more about on this channel. We all like a good book haul, and this one I think is a doozy. Give it a watch if you haven't already done so. On Wednesday, there was an interview with Chris Beckett, author of Dark Eden, Holy Machine, and many more excellent novels and short stories. I really enjoyed chatting to Chris. We covered a lot of ground from our formative years, some of the thinking behind the Eden books, the importance of short stories in science fiction, and we talked about Eric Brown, a friend of his. We spent a bit of time talking about Beneath the World at Sea and Tomorrow, 2 of his more recent books that I've read and enjoyed recently. He also gave some hints about his next book, which he's busy writing, and I was very excited to hear about. I enjoy doing these interviews, although we just don't get many views in comparison to more click-worthy content. And so far, this one has not exactly set the internet ablaze. It might be because Chris Beckett's just a little bit less widely known than some of the other folks that I've spoken to. If you appreciate his work, or if you'd like to know more about it, then I think it's definitely worth a watch. On the book buying front, things have been a little bit slow this week. Having got excited by that 101 books list, I promptly ordered the list covering 1949 to 1984, and that arrived a couple of days ago. I've made one or two other purchases online, but they haven't arrived yet. So my to-be hauled pile stands at just 2 currently. It's still early days, but if it's still slim pickings over the coming weeks, I might skip October's haul video and do a library tour instead. Or I could just do both, of course. Let's take a quick look at what's coming on the channel in the week ahead. On Sunday, there will be a return to a favourite topic, space opera, this time focused on the first decade of the new millennium. There's some cracking books in that list, some very familiar to me and some new. Thank you to those of you that suggested a book for inclusion. Some of those definitely make an appearance. On Wednesday, I'll be taking a closer look at science fiction, 101 best novels, 1985 to 2010. I bought this book about a week ago and I spent more time than I intended browsing through it. And like any good book collector, my first question was, how many of these have I got on my shelves, and how many of them, or rather how few, have I read? So in that video, I'll spend a bit of time talking about the reference book itself, and then I go through which of them I own already and keep a tally of how many I've read. And predictably enough, I then identify 4 or 5 books in that 101 that I'd like to seek out to add to my shelves. Now I expect that there'll be other videos on this topic as I collect and read more of them. A little bit longer range, I want to do a video looking at the science fiction highlights from the 1970s. I haven't really started that yet, apart from making a long list. And you might have seen earlier on the community post a hailing cry for suggestions. So please do give me a shout and let me know what you think I might include in that 1970s video. Reading wise, I have 10 days left in the month and 3 books left to read. I'm hoping to polish off Forge of God in short order. Tomorrow I have a 50-mile running race, 10 or 11 hours out on the trails, which should be enough time just about to finish it, or certainly to break the back of it. In actual physical book, I will tackle the Gene Wolfe short stories. I thought I might get to that this week, but I just haven't had the time. And after that, the only book left on my official TBR pile is The Empire of Fear by Brian Stableford, which is a vampire tale, not my usual reading material, but I am looking forward to it. I've enjoyed the 1 or 2 books of his that I've read. And if I have time after that, I may be able to squeeze in a slender book or 2 before the month is out, but more on that next week. As usual, thank you for watching and have a marvellous weekend, and until next time, goodbye for now.